Hello guys, this is me Simo Urahara, and in this video I'm going to talk about the possibility that Kisuke Urahara is the last villain of the story and what this has to do with the truth and the identity of Kuchiki Rukia. So we will discuss all of this together in this video, and for that I need you guys to focus with me because I'm gonna talk about a lot of things and all these things are connected. And to the minority, which are 0.001% who have a problem with my accent, there is a significant invention called subtitle. If you don't understand my accent, read the subtitle. I made it for you. So don't waste your time to tell me I have a problem with your accent. It's easy. So let's start, guys. So before the release of Bleach's last novel Can't Fear Your Own World, some fans were talking about the possibility that Kisuke Urahara was having, I wouldn't say evil intentions, but he actually has goals that contradict the policy of those who are responsible on the Soul Society, and here I mean the Nobles, the Gotei 13 and the Zero Squad, because in the end Aizen Sosuke or Yuhabach both had certain visions of peace and how the world should be. In Bleach we can't categorize evil and good as black or white, but it's a complex grey area in which there are several factors that make each character define the truth, a truth that is capable of taking a direction that might make a character evil in the eyes of others. And Kisuke in the manga was once considered criminal and accused of treason, as we saw in the Pendulum arc. It is true that he was the victim of Aizen's plan, however, now there are new information mentioned in the novel that clearly hints that Kisuke Urahara is not the angel we believe he is, but he could be at any moment the devil himself if he wanted to. Of course, before diving into the events of the novel that talked about this point, I should note that I did not find the interview in which Kobo mentioned that he was planning to make Kisuke Urahara the villain of the story and later replaced him with Aizen Sosuke. I searched all the interviews available to me and I didn't find this information. All I found was that in one of his interviews, Kobo was asked if he was planning to make Aizen the villain of the story, and he answered that he was planning to make him a villain, and Kisuke wasn't mentioned in this answer. Anyway, to organize the topic, we will talk about how Kobo made Urahara Kisuke a pivotal character from the start. Therefore, we will review together some important events in the manga that we will link with some of Kobo's answers in his private forum to go through what was said about Urahara Kisuke in the novel, especially its last pages that ended with that suspicious conversation between Yoriichi and Urahara Kisuke, in order to try to link everything we will talk about with Hell chapter in the end. So as I said, Urahara Kisuke can be considered the first Shinigami character in the story to be given their own theme. You will ask me how. Some may not know this information, but Urahara Kisuke has been referenced since chapter 1. At the end of that chapter, we all saw how Ichigo took all of Rukia's Shinigami powers and he became a substitute Shinigami, while Rukia was without her powers. The chapter ended with that event, and as Kobo usually do, he made a sketch at the end of that chapter, and it was a scene in which Kisuke Urahara's feet appear and he was watching Ichigo fall to the ground and Rukia beside him. So imagine with me that Kobo since the first chapter gave us a clear concept that nothing is hidden from Urahara Kisuke in Karakura town. Kisuke is like a spider and Karakura is all the threads of his network. Anything that happens will be known, and this is an important point we will focus on later when I'll talk about the chapter of Hell. And to complement the symbolism of that sketch, many fans are overwhelmed by the prevailing thinking that Aizen Sosuke is the master planner for most of Ichigo's path, and he was the one who was manipulating all of Ichigo's opponents, started with the fishbone that appeared in front of his house and ended with their last fight. But what some people do not notice is that Aizen Sosuke is not the actual planner of Ichigo's path, but Ichigo was just an important piece on the chessboard. The two players moved the other pieces in order to win that important piece to their side, and those two players are Aizen Sosuke and Urahara Kisuke. You will ask me how. Okay, let's review the events again. Didn't you notice that any movement made by Aizen Sosuke was immediately faced by Urahara Kisuke? When Aizen sent that hollow fish bond, as I explained, Kisuke was watching that incident, and when he also sent that menace, we noticed how Urahara Kisuke intervened. Even Ichigo asked an important question. He said to Kisuke, "How do I find you everywhere I go?" And when Aizen Sosuke made Byakuya and Renji go to Rukia's location, Urahara Kisuke knew this very well. In the chapter in which the fight between Renji and Ichigo began, Kobo made another sketch shows Urahara Kisuke as he prepares to go out. And then we notice how Kisuke saved Ichigo. And there he said something important. He told Ichigo, "I allowed you to fight them to understand the situation very well." Meaning that Urahara Kisuke is not like a person who just sees events unfold and acts according to the present situation, but he was moving his chess pieces in the short and long term, just like Aizen Sosuke. On the other hand, there is the Hogyoku that Kisuke invented, which is his biggest mystery, and it can be said it is the thing that really makes you doubt his intentions. All we know, and according to what Kisuke himself said, is that in the context of his search for strengthening the Shinigami's Konpaku, he came up with the invention of Hogyoku, and through this scene it may be found that the main goal of Kisuke's invention of Hogyoku is to strengthen the soul of Shinigami. But after the events of Pendulum Arc and Rukia's arrival to the real world and the beginning of the story, something very strange will happen. And as I said, since the events of the first chapter, Kisuke watched Rukia and Ichigo's battle against the fish bone. Then we learned that Urahara Kisuke came to Rukia and offered to help her by giving her that special Kigai, so that he would hide the Hogyoku inside her soul. And this is the weird thing. Why exactly did Kisuke choose Rukia to hide the Hogyoku? And the answer of this question may seem simple if we rely on Aizen's answer at the end of the Soul Society arc, when he told Ichigo and Rukia about the reason why Urahara Kisuke hid Hogyoku inside Rukia. It is because he could not destroy it. Of course, you should take into account that Aizen's words are just a conclusion from his perspective and not a definitive answer, because the one who knows the real answer is Urahara Kisuke himself. The latter did not give us the real answer because it's illogical. If you want to hide something of that importance, you won't be hiding it inside the soul of a person who will be searched for. If she disappears, and she will be arrested and will be under Aizen's eyes, and that's what happened, and we saw it. Therefore, the case that Kisuke wanted to hide the Hogyoku just because he couldn't destroy it, I see it as superficial. Simply because if Kisuke wanted to hide the Hogyoku, he could have placed it in a far place or under his house or any place that no one would be able to see it, not inside a soul like Rukia. So there is another reason for Kisuke to choose Rukia, and we have now new information that confirm this possibility. In one of the questions asked to Kobo in his club outside, he has been asked what did Renji want to know when he went to Kisuke's house and stayed there for that long. Kobo here says that Renji wanted an answer to a question he was asking: why did you choose Rukia in person to hide the Hogyoku? Here Kobo says that Urahara Kisuke answered with half the truth and he lied in the other half. But as a complete answer, it made Renji convinced. And here we have to ask, why did Kisuke have to lie? Simply because he does not want anyone to discover the real reason, whether why he wanted to hide the Hogyoku, as well as why he chose Rukia precisely. And this leads us to another question related to Rukia. So in the same forum, a fan asks Kobo, why is the name Rukia on this page not written with the brush, unlike the name Kuchiki, especially since all the names of the Shinigami are written in brush style? Why is only Rukia's name written like that? Here Kobo replies that this has a purpose. He may draw it somewhere, but he will not be able to answer now. And this is what made some fans open another door of a very good comparisons, which is that the names that Kobo usually draw behind the characters are not arbitrary. As an example, the Shinigami's name are fully painted with the brush style, but the Visor, who have powers other than Shinigami powers, draw their full names in a brush style and the second part in a different style. On this basis, some assume that as long as Kobo did this operation with the Visor, it could be the same with Rukia, meaning if we went on the basis of that concept, it is possible that Rukia has an additional power other than her Shinigami powers, and this is what made Kisuke Urahara preferred to put Hogyoko inside her in order to try something and not hide it. Because as I said, he originally lied to Renji, and we have seen how Urahara Kisuke has been tracking Rukia since the first chapter, and after she lost her power, he came right away to give her that special Giga. And you know the rest. So what I want to reach by listing these informations is that in Kisuke's dictionary, nothing is found by chance. Everything falls within the framework of experiments he does in order to do something that we don't know for the moment. What we must know is that Urahara Kisuke is a character who hides secrets that no one knows, even the closest people to him, and here I'm referring to Richie. And for this we will talk about what was said about Kisuke in the last novel, and I have to say again, you should take into consideration that Narita, the writer of the novel, Kobo told him the entire past of Urahara Kisuke. And if you are following my old videos, not once I said that Narita did confirm that he was shocked by what he heard from Kobo about this matter, in the sense that everything that was said about Urahara Kisuke in the novel may be fragments of the whole truth that Kobo told Narita about Kisuke. So the novel in general, in its 3 parts, talks about the issue of nobles and the history of the Soul Society, which is full of sins, and how Ryu the Soul King was nothing but a pawn and a tool in the hands of the ancestors of the 5 great noble families. The general idea will eventually be reached through a journalistic research that Hisage will be do when he was preparing a report on the last war against the Quincy. So what Hisage was literally doing is what investigative journalists are doing. He began to investigate the facts by doing interviews with several characters. Among those characters was Urahara Kisuke, although Hirako warned Hisage that Urahara was not the person who could answer all of his questions and that he is a evasive person, and that's exactly what happened. Urahara Kisuke avoided answering some sensitive questions that Hisage wanted to ask about the Soul King and Hogyoko. Of course, Urahara Kisuke didn't tell Hisage what he wanted to hear, but through the course of the novel's events and Hisage's meeting with Tokinada, the latter almost told Hisage all the shocking facts, like the reality of the world and how there was a world in which the meaning of life and death was not yet known, and how Ryu appeared and defended humans by attacking hollows, and how he became a game in the hands of the nobles by cutting his organs and making him in the middle of life and death. These secrets, informations that no one knew before, Hisage knew them. So on the basis of these facts, Hisage deduced several things, and in the last part of the novel, exactly in its last pages, Hisage returned to complete the interview with Urahara Kisuke after he had great knowledge of the Soul Society and the Soul King. And while he was remembering all those things, Hisage started to think about a question related to Urahara Kisuke, and it is, why did Kisuke Urahara make Hogyoko in the first place? Here Hisage seemed to give several possibilities, such as that Urahara Kisuke wanted to make Hogyoko in order to create Kompaku with power to replace Ryu's role, or to enable the Shinigami to gain great strength that would enable them to make the worlds balanced and to release Ryu from his suffering. So on this basis of these theories, Hisage told Kisuke that he considered him as a hero, because Hisage thought that what Kisuke was doing from the start was for the sake of Ryu, to release him from that endless suffering. And here the shock comes, at least for me. When Hisage went back to the Soul Society, Yurichi came to Kisuke in the shape of the Black Cat and told him, "Are you going to let him go like this?" Kisuke replied, "Why would we have to do something against him?" Here Yurichi will say to Kisuke, he's simply a journalist and he has learned many things about the Soul Society, or rather your own businesses. I thought you were going to do something to keep him silent. And here Kisuke replied, "This isn't your character, Yurichi." Yurichi then will reply with an answer that includes a dangerous word. She said, "I'm not saying you should kill him like Tokinada would do." And this shows how dangerous the information Hisage has accessed. But in addition to that, Urahara Kisuke told her, "It seems that Hisage thinks I created the Hogyoko for Ryu." Yurichi here will reply to him, "I guess he didn't make any mistake, right? This is even more awkward. Imagine with me that the closest person to Urahara Kisuke doesn't know why Kisuke Kisuke created the Hogyoko, because Kisuke will respond to her by saying, "You are wrong, you are completely wrong." And this, guys, reminds me one of the first scenes in the first part of the novel when Yorichi was present at the meeting of the nobles. Tokinada told her, "You saw how Ryu was ripped like, but you don't know what he originally looked like, nor how he was from the beginning." But Kisuke Urahara must be aware of this, and this is further evidence that Kisuke Urahara has information and things that he hides from everyone, even the closest people to him. Because Yorichi thought, like Hisagi, that Kisuke was trying to save Ryu, but he told her directly, "I didn't want to do that in the first place. All I wanted is to open a new door, and in the end I'm not different from Mayuri," and how he sacrificed many things in order to satisfy his desire to discover. And here Kisuke will add the most important point in the matter when he added that if a day comes and he becomes a person who can be described as a villain, he wishes that someone would determine whether he made a mistake or not. And he set the example of Hisagi with Tosen, and Kisuke added that Ichigo and Rukia could do it too. But here Yorichi tells him, "Am I not able to do that?" Kisuke replies that no matter what others will say, she will remain by his side because she is not entirely neutral. So as you can see, Urahara Kisuke himself is well aware of the swamp in which he is, which we don't know as well, as I said in the beginning of this video. And he is currently someone who had made great service to Shinigami and Ichiro Kurosaki, but there is a piece missing around him, we don't know it. So at any moment Kisuke could be the hidden demon of the story. And here I remember the scene of Ginjo with Ichigo. It is true that Ginjo wanted by any means to include Ichigo on his side, so he was trying to manipulate him. But Ginjo said an important sentence about Urahara Kisuke. He said, "Do you really have the full knowledge that enables you to say that you know that person Urahara?" And I also ask this question, what do we know about Urahara Kisuke? Who is he? We don't know his deep past, and we don't know his main purpose in making Hogyoko. He talked about opening new door. His word might be a metaphor, and his word may literally mean something new, especially since he spoke about Ichigo and said that he is no longer a child and that he will open new door and new worlds that we have not seen yet, carrying his fear and hope. And I repeat, these scenes were the last scenes of the novel. Then came the events of the Hell chapter, and the thing that excites me about the events of that chapter is that Urahara Kisuke has made the entire Soul Society under his control by providing them with new technology during the last 10 years. And the other thing is that I find that Kobo mentioning Urahara Kisuke without seeing him in the chapter was suspicious. Why? I have made it clear enough that Karakura town is under Kisuke's grip. Almost nothing is hidden from him, so he will surely know what the Shinigami was doing and that they will do something for the Konso Reisai. And the most importantly of all, could it be that Urahara Kisuke did not know that there was a gate inside the temple that Kazuo went to? Is it possible that Urahara Kisuke does not know the movement of Ichigo's son and that he was the one who was watching Ichigo in every step he took from the start of the story? I know it's a small possibility, but for example, if it appears that Urahara Kisuke belongs to the unknown noble family and that his family is responsible for Hell, then surely Kisuke will be a part of it. And because of that, Kobo will draw the awaited flashback of Kisuke Urahara, who narrator wanted to see it in a form of a manga. So in the end, guys, in the end of this topic, what we must know is that Urahara Kisuke at any moment could be the real demon of the story, if he had a real purpose that we don't know. In the end, guys, tell me your opinion about this topic and see you in my next video.